Hello and welcome to Not the Basement. We're actually upstairs today in the house, and here we are in the living room, and I wanted to show you this. This is a classic cocktail arcade cabinet, and I bought this for my wife a few weeks ago, and it was for her birthday. She loved it and she's been playing it a lot and getting really good at it, but it stopped working. So we're going to have a look at it today and see if we can figure out what's gone wrong. So before we get into it, I'll just show you the machine. This is a classic cocktail arcade cabinet. It's dated from maybe early 80s, and it's had the game board removed. So I believe that this was originally a Space Invaders machine, but it's had that board removed and it's been replaced with a 60-in-1 jammer board. So you've got 60 of the classic arcade games available when you play this. And the coin mechanism's retained, so you've got to put in $1 and you get a credit that way. Now the thing that hasn't been replaced on this particular machine is the monitor. It's got the original arcade monitor in here, which is great for that authentic arcade feel. However, that's the thing that stopped working. So every time we turn it on, it just blows the fuse on the monitor's board straight away. So we're going to pull the board today and have a look around and see if we can see why it's blowing that fuse, and maybe we can fix it. Okay, so the board we need is actually down here, and to get to it we need to pull the monitor out first and then we'll pull the board out. So I'll get to that and we'll pick it up once I've got the board free. And so typically there's always one screw that's a problem. This one's been totally threaded, so we're going to have to get the pliers on this one and get it out the old-fashioned way. Not any bigger pliers. Okay, hopefully these ones will do the job. Okay, I've disconnected all the monitor except for the anode, which is right there. So I'll position this monitor somewhere where I can use both hands, and we will discharge that now. Okay, so to discharge the CRT, we need to short out the anode that's under here and short it out to the frame here. So to do that, we use a screwdriver, which is connected to this lead, and we're going to clip the lead on the middle frame, and we're just going to jam this underneath that rubber cap there and short it out. But before we do that, I'm going to put my safety mitt on. Great, now we're safe, and let's just wedge it under here and hopefully nothing explodes. Okay, so I'm pretty confident that's discharged. Let's pull this off now. Okay, we can access the board now. I've finished undoing it and we can pull it out of the machine, and there it is. So we'll put this on the bench and start having a closer look at it. Okay, we're back down in the basement and we have the board with us. It's a pretty old looking board, which reminds me, if you want a new board, then you should check out PCBWay. That's right, PCBWay does PCBs, but also sheet metal fabrication, 3D printing, and even CNC machining. Whatever crazy idea in your head can be turned into reality at PCBWay.com. So thanks PCBWay for sponsoring this video today. So this is the board, and it's quite old and it's pretty grimy, and there's a couple of issues that I've noticed straight away. And the first one is a loose wire here that should be connected to that. It looks like it's just corroded, so we can fix that. And the other issue is there's a broken corner here on the board. And I don't think it's broken any traces, but we'll have to have a close look at that and see if we can repair that somehow. So the issue I was having was every time I'd turn it on, there is a 1 amp fuse that goes in this holder here, and that would just blow straight away. So it's getting too many amps, and I'm wondering if it's because it's not using this resistor here. So hopefully that fixes the problem. We can put it back together and test it, and my wife can go back to making awesome high scores. I'm going to remove this old broken wire. It's all pretty corroded at the end here, and I've got a new one here to put on. Too easy. Okay, we've got the wire in place with a handy dandy arm holding it there. Let's just solder it on. Now it had this sheathing over the original wire, so I'll put that back on. Looks like some sort of heat resistant shielding there. So we'll just pop it through the hole there and let's solder it on there. So I'm calling that job done. Now let's have a look at the broken corner on this. Okay, so here's our broken corner, and you can see if we pull it apart, there is something underneath this rail, some sort of solder, but I don't think it's broken any traces. I do notice that these rails are on top of these solder points here, but I presume that these are a ground, so it shouldn't matter if they're touching. Otherwise it's a pretty dumb design. I might just pull this rail off and we can have a look underneath and just double check that this is fine. Okay, we can see our broken corner, and it looks like it's just broken through this trace here, which is a ground trace all the way around the edge, so that shouldn't be too much of an issue. It gets quite close to these, but it doesn't look like it's done any damage. So I'm going to put that rail back on, and we'll just drill a new hole up here and drill it to the rail further along, just so it supports that edge of the board. So nice and secure. I've changed the screw just because I couldn't get the old one to thread into the hole I drilled. And now we've got a board which is no longer just hanging in that corner. So this other bit's been soldered. We might put it back together, and fingers crossed it's going to work. Okay, just before we put it back in, I don't want to forget to put the fuse in, so let's put it in now. It's a 1 amp fuse, and hopefully it's not going to blow when we turn the power on. Okay, let's test it. And that was the fuse blowing again, so we haven't fixed it, but I have a plan B. So it's been about 3 years since I shot that last scene. Thankfully I still have the same t-shirt for continuity reasons, but I remember saying that I had a plan. I couldn't get this to work, and I have had a look at it a few times since, and it's just beyond my pay grade, I'm afraid. I can't figure out what is causing the fuse to blow. So my cunning plan was to get a old CRT monitor, and the jammer board has a VGA out, and just run it from that. So I was looking for like a 15-inch monitor, and that's sort of where my plan came a bit unstuck, because I seem to recall CRT monitors, like, people couldn't give them away. They were just everywhere. But nowadays when you try to find them, especially when you want a specific size, they're very hard to find if you don't want to spend a fortune on them. So that was my plan. That's why it's kind of taken so long. I struggled finding anything. I did find a 19-inch, but it's just too big for the case. So this is the original screen here, and that's really the size that I was after. So my plan is now, I'm going to use this IBM monitor that I've got. I've actually got the whole Aptiva system, and so I really didn't want to pull this one apart. It is the right size, but because I can't find anything else, I'm going to pull this apart in a way that I can put it back together if I do find another 15-inch monitor that will fit in the arcade machine. So yeah, we're going to pull this tube out of here and the associated electrics, swap the brackets over, and hopefully it should just fit in the arcade cabinet machine. This is actually the second time I've been in here, because I rescued this whole Aptiva system from a skip bin where the leads had been cut off, and because this VGA cable is like wired in, they just snipped it. So I actually went in and reconnected every single little wire to make it work again. It looks like this tube is slightly larger than the old one. We might have to modify this bracket a little bit. Yeah, that's the front bezel. Okay, I've trimmed the brackets. I just needed to make them slightly wider because this tube is slightly wider. So I just took a bit of that corner off, just a few mil each side, and that's enough for it to sit a bit closer down. And now, of course, my holes don't line up anymore, so I'm going to drill new holes right in the center of these mounting lugs. So it just so happens through, I guess, a happy coincidence, that the mounting holes that held this bracket, which was for the old PCB, happened to be in exactly the right spot to mount the new PCB. And the spacing is the same as well, so that's pretty cool. Nice. So the bracket's on, nicely attached, supporting the weight of the tube. That all worked fine, and because those holes aligned on the other side, I was able to space the PCB off the bracket here, and also I can still access these adjusting buttons, so I can make sure that I can adjust the screen to get everything looking right when we get it back in. I guess now we've got to see if it actually fits inside the cabinet. I hope it does. Okay, I guess we just drop it in and see if it works. So the tube itself is probably in a good spot. However, it is hitting the back of the tube, and the brackets aren't hard down against the cabinet, so I might have to just fiddle around with some washers and just space everything out a bit. Okay, I fiddled around with it a bit. I put some packers underneath the brackets here to keep the tube in the same spot, but to push these brackets down so that they would sit on top of this carcass. And now everything seems to be in just the right spot. The tube might be slightly high, but I've just got no more room, really got no wiggle room at all, because we're about, well, almost hard on the bottom at the other end. So the other issue we have is this board is very long, and so I need to plug something in the back of it, unless I disassemble that IEC connector. But I'm thinking I can just raise the board up so the board's just sitting underneath that lid, which means drilling a couple of new holes in it and mounting it up there. Okay, so that's where I drilled through, and it lifted a lot of the trace around there, but I'm pretty sure I've still got continuity from one side to the other. I'm not quite sure how, but it beeps, so I'm just going to go with it. So we've got very minuscule amount of room at the bottom here. So if I can find a right angle plug, that might work. I found one. Oh, it's going to be tight. It might just be resting on the bottom of the case, but I think that'll be okay. Now all that's left to do is to clean up the inside of the cocktail cabinet. Take out the old stuff that powered the old screen and put in probably a double power point so we can plug the other stuff into it and have everything come on with one switch. That's the idea. So we don't need this anymore. This is the 240 volt to 100 volt transformer that was powering the monitor in there, because it's probably a Japanese made, and Japanese stuff runs on 100 volts obviously. So yeah, we don't need this anymore. This is a 12 volt power supply for the jammer board. I might move it over just so we've got a bit more room. Right, well, we're getting there with the install. I actually had to flip the monitor around 180 degrees because it was upside down. This should be the bottom of the player one screen, which works in our favour though, because this circuit board really doesn't fit in there with the power cord plugged in the back of it. So by having it here on the other side of the monitor, I've got heaps more room, and I can actually lay it back down on more of an angle and get it to fit in there. So I might do that now, and then it's just a bit of tidying up the wiring inside, and I reckon it's going to be done. These are the brackets I've fashioned. They should do the job. Great, I think that's going to work quite well. Let's pull it out and sort out the wiring inside here. So I've also got this piece of rubber down here, and that's just going to double side tape to the base of the machine, or the cabinet, and so that the wires coming out of the back of that circuit board will sit on top of that. The idea with the wiring is I'm not super happy with it just kind of being exposed in here. I know it's a sealed appliance, but still, you know, if people open the lid to fiddle with the coin mechanism or something, I'd rather this was covered. So I'm going to put a box over the junction behind the switch, and then from there run an insulated cable across to this GPO, which I'll mount on this side, and the monitor and the 12-volt power supply will both plug into that, switched from underneath the machine behind this. Now remember, I'm not a licensed electrician. Don't try this at home. This is for entertainment purposes only. This is not a guide. Okay, that's much neater. It was quite dangerous, I think, before. Just the mains coming in, taped together, a bit of a rat's nest, different colours, incorrect colours. So now it's insulated, safe, it's properly earthed, and we've got 2 GPOs here to plug in our 2 appliances. So I'll attach this down here somewhere, and then I reckon we're just about ready to put it back together. Okay, moment of truth, let's plug it in and switch it on. Okay, switch it on underneath. Huh. Nothing's happening. Is the monitor switched on? Yes. Oh dear. Oh, okay, it is working. I just had the switch around the wrong way. I turned it off instead of on. Oh, that's a relief. What I want to do now is just make sure that the size of the screen is correct and that it's not like too skew-off. Okay, there it is. I don't know if you can see on the angle you're on, but the whole screen needs to move over to the left slightly, and perhaps down just a touch. Too much. Perfect. Well, I guess all that's left to do is put a coin in there and have a game. Well, it seems to be working great now. That's awesome. I'm going to put it back upstairs, back into the games room. So I guess it's thanks very much to the old IBM monitor. It donated all of its important bits to keep that cocktail arcade cabinet going for a bit longer. Now, of course, if I do find another 15-inch monitor, I'll swap it in there and put all those lovely bits and pieces back in this IBM case, and it can go back with its Aptiva buddy. But for now, I'm pretty happy. Job well done. 3 years in the making, unfortunately, but it's done now. All that's left to do is put the machine back upstairs and play a few games. You've been in the basement. Have a great day.